Okay, great. Well, thank you all for being here today. Today, we are going to give you a brief overview and orientation of the expectations for SLM instructors. Thank you so much for expressing your interest. We look forward to delivering this program. The program has been in place for a couple of years now and found it very successful as far as folks getting into the program and getting their certificates. So look forward to kind of and welcoming you into our instructor pool. The goal of today's orientation is really just to kind of give you an overview of the expectations. As far as like the content training, we will kind of leave that kind of more to you. I'll give you some pointers as we get into the presentation a little bit later. But really, we're not going to focus too much on content and kind of teaching you how to teach the content. That's something that we hope that you'll kind of fine-tune over time. Being paired with existing instructors for classes and things like that will help you kind of refine your approach to the content and teaching the content. So we're going to give you some kind of an overview and orientation and then move on from there. I'm Melissa Emden. I'm the Education Programs and Education Director at ALCC. I manage all of our education programs and a lot of our member events as well. The SLM program falls under my responsibilities and has been for a couple of years. I've been involved in the development process and then obviously the administration of the program. I'll give you a brief background of the program. As I mentioned, we launched this program in late 2019. We spent about a year and a half, 2 years developing the program. If you've taken the program before, and if you remember from the introduction and from sort of the instructor's comments, we just kind of speed up the development of this program. We worked with the Arizona Landscape Contractors Association, who had an existing program, the existing SLM program that they developed a few years prior to bringing it when we brought it to Colorado. But we partnered with them on the development of the program and kind of using their program as a blueprint for ours. We worked directly with the individual who wrote the book and helped them develop the program in Arizona. She's a landscape architect out of Arizona. And so we worked with those groups to kind of speed up the process a little bit and bring it here. We had a group of folks that kind of helped to review the content and make it more Colorado focused. We combined it with the Green Co BMPs, if you're familiar with those, and some of our existing sort of best management processes here to kind of come up with the program. Launched in 2019. It does focus, we say it focuses primarily on commercial landscape maintenance. However, some of the references within the book and the presentation are, commercial sites and things like that, but we do see it applicable in residential, and some of our instructors are, work in the residential aspect, residential part of the industry. So definitely for both, but primarily focused on commercial maintenance. The program is a 4-hour training class, and then the training manual that goes along with that, which is right here. The participants must pass the post-class exam and get a 70%, which is the passing score, to earn the certificate. At this point, we're kind of getting closer to actually 600 individuals who have earned the SLM designation since we started the program back in 2019. And then we require the designation to be renewed every 2 years via an exam and a renewal fee. So you pay the renewal fee and take the exam, and then your designation is renewed for another 2 years. And we're into that process, several years into that process since the program's been in place. We're kind of into, this is the first year we've had 3 years of renewals kind of under our belt. So, so folks are renewing their designation and maintaining that for us. Just a little bit of detail about the training class format. It's a 4-hour class, as I mentioned. Primarily, it's from 8 a.m. to noon. Usually, that's what the schedule that we run. Occasionally, we will offer it at different times. Usually, when we offer it at Pro Green Expo every year, the times might change a little bit. We might move to an afternoon class, but plan on it typically being from 8 a.m. to noon. Participants have to have a copy of the manual with them for the class. We host the classes at various locations across really the Denver metro area. In the past, we've mostly had them at CPS locations. Last year, ALCC moved to a new office space that has a training room in the building. So we have started to offer the class at our office a couple times a year. But we do like to kind of rotate it around. We typically do have at least one class every year at Northern Water up in Berthoud. They're one of our program partners and have hosted us there. So we kind of travel around so that we can get the class kind of delivered in different places. We have not yet hosted it out on the western slope or in the mountains, but that is sort of that's in the plans for this year to be able to offer some additional education out there in the western slope and mountain chapter. The class is primarily in person. During COVID, we did develop it into a virtual class and offered it several times as a virtual class. Just due to the length of the class, an in-person class works a lot better. 4 hours is a long time to kind of be holed up in front of a computer. And 4 hours in a class is kind of a long time too. So we just find it works better in person if we have that opportunity. There's networking as well. You can meet other folks that are in the class that you can't necessarily do that in the virtual format. So it is an option. We just haven't used it really since COVID, but there is an option available for virtual classes if we need to. The preferred format is 2 instructors. We prefer to have 2 instructors just because it helps to break up the content for participants. It helps to be able to have 2 different voices and potentially 2 different presentation styles to cover different portions of the presentation. I'm pretty sure most of you have the class that you took was probably just a 1 instructor. If we do have trouble getting instructors, or if we have a seasoned instructor, we'll just go with 1 instructor. But we prefer to have that 2 instructor format to have sort of to break the class up. All right, I'm just going to move into expectations for the instructors. We want you all to have earned the SLM certificate, which you all have. Yay. We prefer that you have 5 years of experience in the industry, preferably on the maintenance side, because that's typically what's covered in the book. So having that experience kind of helps you speak to what some of the things you've seen and be able to kind of bring to life what's in the presentation and the manual. We prefer that you have experience in instructing in sort of a formal environment. It's not required. We do want everyone to have kind of experience in training another person or training in a group of employees in an informal aspect. We think that the ability to be comfortable in front of an audience, in front of a group, is important. So we want you to have that instructional experience to feel comfortable kind of presenting the material in front of others and not to get super nervous. We want, of course, instructors are expected to volunteer to instruct classes as requested. I'll send out the schedule of classes as much as I did to you all about once or twice a year, and hopefully to get folks to volunteer for that. That's one of the expectations, of course. We also have regular instructor check-in meetings or email conversations. We haven't had an in-person meeting in a while. But we probably will in the next few weeks or next few months here, just to kind of get a feel for what's going on with the program, things that are coming up. I'll cover that a little bit later in this presentation, but we'll probably be doing one in the next several months as we're kind of doing some things related to the program that are important that you all kind of are aware of. Specific expectations around the classroom environment and sort of logistical things. As far as the presentation goes, we want instructors, if possible, to bring their own laptop with the presentation loaded. It just helps to kind of, if you have it on your laptop, that kind of helps just to have, you're familiar with your own technology and things like that. We do have a laptop you can use if you need to. I'll work with you all once you are confirmed to instruct a class on kind of the logistical details, but we prefer that you bring your own laptop if you can. If not a big thing. I'm happy to bring mine too. We want you to get there about 10 to 15 minutes before the class to get set up and feel comfortable, get the laptop connected if you need to, and then kind of just make sure you're all ready to go. I'll get into sort of the presentation pointers a little bit later, but we just don't want you to read the slides word for word. Please don't do that. It's not super engaging for the for the attendees, and really we want you to be able to bring the content to life for them, and reading it word for word is not, it's not where it's at. So we want you to make sure you can kind of adapt the slides, adapt the material in the presentation to kind of make it more lively for folks. We want you to be able to, as I mentioned, make the content lively. 4 hours is a long time to be talked at, so definitely some things we can talk about, some things to kind of make the content more engaging for folks. Some of our instructors, use sort of personal and professional anecdotes to do that. I would say use those sparingly as you can. The things you can do to kind of bring use the manual to kind of help you kind of bring the presentation kind of to life. Has somebody raised their hand? It looks like here. Or not? Oh, yes. Brian, go ahead. I think you're muted, maybe. I don't think I can hear you. Oh, yes, thank you. I was just going to tell you to write a comment in the chat. Yes, the presentation is already, we'll get to that in just a minute here. I'll share with you the presentation. It is already developed. That's part of what the author of the manual put together. She put together the manual and the presentation for us. So that's already developed. We'll talk about that in just a minute here as far as some notes and things to think about as far as the presentation goes. One of the other expectations for instructors is to work with staff on checking in attendees. Typically, this isn't needed, just to kind of lay out what our staff does. Typically, there's always going to be an ALCC staff member present at check-in. Usually, that's me. We are hiring a new events coordinator person, and occasionally, and that might be that person in the future coming to the class. But our staff will typically arrive about 15 to 30 minutes in advance and kind of make sure the room's all set up. And we've got the list of attendees. We'll bring in the manuals for folks that have purchased them that haven't picked them up yet, or they're going to be picking them up at class. So we'll have those available. And then once we get everyone checked in, we will kind of provide some background information, just sort of details for housekeeping things. We'll kind of do an intro to the class, as well as provide an instructor introduction as well. Once you are you're on the schedule to present a class, we'll ask you for just a brief bio, so we will introduce the instructor as well. Once we introduce the class and kind of the speaker, we will turn it over to you to start the presentation. And then our staff may or may not stay in the room the whole time. We may leave about halfway through or once the class kind of gets going. So we want to make sure you're comfortable with the room and the material. We ask that you don't refer to us too much during the class if you were there. It lends to the professionalism of the class that you kind of are in charge of the folks that are there and the content and things like that. So we'll be there to support, but at the same time, once the class gets going, we'll kind of fade into the background, if you will. All right, let me move ahead to the next slide here. Okay, we'll get into the presentation here for a minute. Before we do that, does anyone have any questions on anything I've gone over so far? All right, hearing nothing, I'll go ahead and move forward onto the presentation. So the presentation, which I will, after this slide, I'll pull up and so you can see kind of how it looks. The presentation, if you remember from the class, there's a little over 100 slides on the presentation, so it's quite extensive. And that's a lot of slides to go through in 4 hours. So the presentation does not track one for one with the manual. So, page 5 of the manual is not slide 5 in the in the presentation. This book is a little bit over, I think it's close to 140 pages here. So it doesn't necessarily track one for one, but it does, I mean, the sections are together and it's essentially intended to kind of go in order, but you can't exactly go to the page in the manual that is the slide. It just kind of doesn't work like that. On some of the slides, there are some notes directing people to specific pages in the manual with more information, like, if you've got this turf care maintenance schedule, things like that are really important resources for folks, but we don't necessarily cover them in the presentation. So that's kind of how that works here. So just kind of as you're reviewing the presentation, make sure that you really review it closely, especially with the presenter notes that are located below, that are not in the presentation, but they're just for the presenter. Make sure you review those. Let's see here. What was I going to point out here before we moved on to the content? I'm sure I'll come back to it. We want you to be familiar with the content. Make sure you're very, very familiar with the presentation and the manual, and sort of use your whatever strategy you want to take to prepare for the presentation once you're scheduled to present a class. It helps me to kind of review the presentation and the manual together and kind of lay out kind of how you want to go about it. So just make sure that you're prepared. We want each instructor is responsible for learning the content and the material. This is super important. Don't contradict any information in the manual or the presentation. We realize that, this was based on best practices, and best practices may vary from place to place and from company to company. So please don't contradict any information that's in here. It definitely detracts from the professionalism of the class and of ALCC in general. If you have any issues with any of the information that's presented here, or if you feel like there's something that's incorrect, please contact me outside of the classroom environment. I'm happy to kind of walk you through things, or we do have an opportunity about every year or two to make updates to the content in the manual. So just make sure that if you have something that seems incorrect, please don't mention that in the class in front of the attendees. Please ask me questions or talk to me after outside of the class environment. When we get to the presentation here in just a second, we want you to stay on track. So make sure that you can cover all the slides in the 4-hour time period. So slide 3, when we get to the presentation, has sort of suggested timing for each of the sections within the presentation. So we'll take a look at those in a second here. And then we'll probably we usually give people a 10 or 15-minute break about halfway through the presentation. Typically that's after the trees and shrubs section of the presentation. Let me go ahead and let me stop sharing this presentation, and we'll just go quickly to look at the actual presentation here for the class. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that here. I'll hop into the slideshow version here in just a second, but you'll see that, yeah, there's 108 slides. 2 are the sort of the opening and closing, title slides, but there's about 106 slides of actual information in here. So lots of detail. The first several slides, kind of slides 1 through 9, really kind of are the orientation or the sort of the introduction to each of the areas within the presentation in the manual. And then slide 10 gets into the first section kind of in the book, which is soils. So that's kind of what I'm talking about with some of the slides. The slides don't track one for one. We've got sort of some introduction and some other slides in here that kind of aren't exactly in the order of the book. Something to note just for you and for if you get questions from attendees, the test that folks take after the class the 50 question post-class exam to earn the certificate. Everything they need to know is in the book and has a reference in the book. There are a few slides in the presentation that aren't necessarily in the book, but they're not covered in the test. Everything they need for the test is in the book, and everything that's in the book is in the slide somehow, if that makes sense. So everything's being covered. There's nothing that should be a surprise to folks when they get to that exam. We really are sort of teaching to the test and making sure that everything is covered. There's just extra information, not a lot, but there's a lot of detail in the presentation that is not necessarily covered in the questions. So in case you get questions and just for your knowledge, that's something we kind of try to point out to folks. So you'll see here throughout the presentation, there's some slides have notes as far as where the pages are at the beginning of every section of a new section here. So the first, let's see here, slides 10 through about 23 are all soils related. So that will all kind of cover. When we switch to a new section here, like trees on slide 25, we'll reference kind of where that is in the book. This doesn't here, but I will add that. As I mentioned, a good place to break is kind of, after the trees, or depending on how quickly you're going after trees or after shrubs. Let me move back here to slide 3. Here's sort of this timing of sections that was referred to in my slides earlier. But basically, we want you to kind of, if you can stick to this timing, you should be able to kind of finish everything up by the noon time frame. Depending on how fast you talk, how many questions you have from folks, you may we're looking to kind of, there's time built in for that as well. So this is just sort of a guide. If you kind of want to get to the end of the shrub section by the break, you should be in a good position to kind of finish up by noon or even before. And again, you kind of, as much as you can as you're going through here, and if you have time, depending on how much, class interaction you're looking for, feel free to ask folks, what their experience is with some of these, or ways you can kind of engage the folks as we're going through here. Some things that I see instructors do that I think work really well. If you have time, if your class is kind of, we average about, I'm going to say about 20 or so attendees per class, which is a good class size. If you have that amount or lower, you can have folks kind of spend just a minute or two kind of going over, asking them what their background is and what their job is currently. The class is very popular with folks in the municipality and water provider realm. We do see a lot of folks in the traditional landscape company arena too, but so we're seeing a lot of municipalities, and things vary by municipality. So that's kind of one of the things that kind of adds some discussion into the class or add some interaction. So just some other suggestions for ways to engage the class and get them kind of interacting and asking questions and stuff, and not just staring at you with a blank stare waiting for the time to be over, which we hope is not the case, but we want to kind of engage the class as much as possible. Yeah, so there's about, I'm going to scroll down through the end here. So there's about 105 slides. And one of the other things that I think is helpful is if you have another instructor, is to break up the content and focus on what areas you might have the most experience in or might feel most passionate about, and kind of bring that to the forefront too. So another benefit of having two instructors is that you can kind of break up the content and focus on the things that you may be doing in your job every day, as opposed to some other things that you may not necessarily do on a day-to-day basis. We have some folks that aren't necessarily in the irrigation aspect of things all the time. So if they've got another instructor, it's helpful to kind of have that irrigation, that person cover the irrigation who covers that, or does that on a daily basis, things like that. So any questions on the presentation so far? And feel free to pop them in the chat if you're not, if you want to as well. I'll go ahead and send this out to you by email after the class. Since the presentation has over 100 slides, it's large. So I'll put it, it's on a Google Drive that you can access. Please don't make changes to the presentation as well. We have sort of copyright issues around the presentation. Again, if there's something you feel like works better for you, as far as the way things are covered, feel free to kind of move around in the slide presentation, but just try not to move things, or please don't move things out of order, and please just kind of keep them the way they are. You're welcome to kind of have your own notes, things like that. And again, let me know if you think something works better overall in a different format or a different place. I'm happy to have that conversation with you and consider outside of the class. All right, I'm going to stop sharing that one and go back to my other presentation here. We just have a few more slides and then we'll wrap things up. Okay, so we kind of go over the presentation for a while here. So what happens after the class? I will go ahead and I'll mention this when I do the, or when our staff, or if it's me or whoever else, as part of the class introduction, we'll share with folks on how they are to access the post-class exam. If you all remember from taking it recently, or maybe a little less, a little longer than recently, the link to take the test comes out after the class in an email. So some folks do come to the class kind of expecting to take the test there. It happens after the class. So feel free to make sure folks know that too. I'll cover that in the introductory comments to the class. But so I'll send out I'll work with folks on their tests afterwards and whatnot. But each instructor does receive a $200 stipend each time they teach the class. So after that class, I will reach out to you and coordinate that. We do need you to fill out a W-9 before the first check is sent. Once we have that W-9, it shouldn't take too long, but sometimes the first one takes a little bit longer to get to you, just because we've got to get that W-9 first. We'll mail the checks out probably about 10 days after the class. I'll confirm with you where you want it sent. But they typically don't get there, especially the first time you teach. Within about 10 days afterwards is when you can expect them. Just sort of, as I mentioned, we meet with SLM instructor pool. There's about 10 or 12 folks that are currently in the pool for instructors that have taught classes before and teach them on occasion, some more frequently than others, just depending on their availability. But we do check in with them every several months, and it's probably about time to have a sort of a meeting again and have a phone call conversation with the group, just to kind of get make folks all on the same page about kind of what's happening with the program and expanding that program in the future. There's a couple of things on the horizon. Some of you may have heard about this. Existing instructors kind of have been part of this development, but we have developed a designation program called Sustainable Landscape Communities that offer designations to sites maintained using SLM principles and by SLM certificate holders. It's sort of a way to, for communities to have that stamp of approval that they are using SLM principles. It actually has been out for a couple of years now, but we've only had one community go through the process to get this designation at this point. We will be promoting it. We've kind of made some tweaks here and there since we piloted it with that program about a year and a half ago. So you'll probably be hearing more about it this year. It does require a decent amount of data to be submitted as part of the application. So if you have questions on that or want to talk to me about that further, I'm happy to talk with you offline, but we'll start promoting that with SLM certificate holders a little bit more this year, so you'll be hearing about it further. See, we are sort of in the development phase of a Spanish version of SLM, working with our Latinos committee, and be watching for that coming out here soon, hopefully in the next year or so. We had hoped to have it available this year, but I think the committee had a lot of work to do with that. So we're looking to move forward with a Spanish version of SLM. Sort of in lieu of having that Spanish version available, we are getting some questions from folks and allowing folks to bring in, Spanish-speaking folks can bring in, I'm okay as long as they work with me ahead of time, but we do have some folks that bring interpreters with them, Spanish-speaking folks who bring interpreters with them to the class to kind of help them understand the material. Since we don't have it available in Spanish yet, we do sort of allow that on a case-by-case basis, and have sort of used that a couple of times. So if you are teaching one of the classes with an interpreter, I will let you know that. And typically those folks just kind of sit together, kind of try to sit away from the rest of the class. It hasn't been disruptive at this point. So I don't find it disruptive or anything, just as long as they're kind of not sitting, kind of sitting away and are quietly kind of communicating. It's fine with me. One of the things we are working on as well, sort of as continuing to expand the program, is we're developing a more intensive version of SLM, sort of a incorporating installation as well as maintenance, and sort of best practices on sustainable landscaping overall in Colorado. We're working to develop that certification now. And hoping to roll it out next year. I'll be providing some more information in the next couple weeks to SLM instructors and SLM certificates holders. Overall, we may be asking you to participate in the content development. We've been working with sort of a smaller group in the planning phases as we're kind of rolling it out. We're working with CSU and some of our nursery partners, front range education partners, industry partners. We're getting to the point where we're kind of working to develop what content is going to be in that. And I would imagine we'll be reaching out to folks fairly soon here with some additional, if you want to be involved, we'd be happy to have you. And so be watching out for more information on what the content looks like for that. Moving forward here, just a list of the training classes scheduled for the year. We do have one next week at our office here in Denver. We're actually looking for at least an additional instructor for that. So if you're interested and available next Wednesday from 8 to noon, let me know, and I'm happy to kind of work with you to get into the instructor phase for that. And then the rest of the schedule is listed here as well. The October date that's to be determined is likely going to be at Northern Water in Berthoud. We're just working with them to kind of confirm what that looks like. We may include a tour of their conservation gardens there as well. So, but this is the schedule for the year. So let me know if any of the class dates are you're available for any of those. We'd be happy to have you. Again, we pair you with a more experienced instructor for some of these, for at least your first time or two. So just let me know if you're available, and I will kind of give you more details after that. All right, any questions overall? And you can unmute now if you want to ask questions here. All right. Oh, great. Great. Thanks. Ed, I'll follow up with you soon here. So I'll just follow up with you separately if you're available. That would be great. Let me know if you have questions at any time. Oops, cancel. I'm happy to help you. Look forward to working with you as an instructor. I'm happy that you found the material engaging and are interested in kind of taking this next step to volunteer with the program. Let me know if you need anything. Otherwise, I'll let you get on with your day. Thank you.